Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm your host, Malachi Greb. Today we have an awesome guest today, Craig Ulrich, and he is the CEO of one of the biggest automation companies in the world, JR Automation, and he spent 25 years at General Motors. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks. Looking forward to a nice discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely for me, I mean, I'm a very ambitious person. So whenever I get somebody onto the podcast who's had like what I consider a very successful career, they make it to like VP of engineering, CEO of a company. And especially when they're not the founder, when they climb that ladder and it's something that I don't even know that I can really accomplish. Maybe at this point in time, I can climb the corporate ladder, but I think without starting a business, I don't know if I'd ever have the capability to do it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you could. I know many founders, and I think it takes a little bit of ambition, and you obviously have tons of it, right? So I think that's the key, right? Is that ambition. I certainly never had my eyes set on CEO. I never had them set on a vice president. I never had them set on a director. I just went and worked hard every day, and every founder is the same, right? Every day you go in, you work hard, and you're trying to improve your business. I was doing the same thing. I would say that's probably the biggest part of my success is even at General Motors, I thought I was an entrepreneur. I was trying to do better for the company and for myself and for my group, and I think those are the things that led to me being able to climb the ladder. It was not worrying about whether I could or could not. It was more about just going in and working hard every day to improve everyone's life, because that's what you're doing too, right? As a founder, it's not just about you anymore. You have a whole bunch of people that are relying on you to do well, and I was no different. Even today, as CEO of a company, a major automation company, the people rely on me to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like super, super important. You kind of kept it simple and said, it's putting in the hard work and is looking out for people and looking out for the company's best interest. And that's so powerful in any success. And I think it's one of the huge drivers of why I had the success I've had and had, when I say the audacity to start a company, was because like I just kept doing more things to add value to the company. I learned electrical engineering. I learned risk assessments and how to do safety analysis on robotic systems. And just doing that just to add value is like what gave me all these different skill sets and capabilities to be like, I think I could run my own company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you became well-rounded, right? And I can tell you at General Motors, I became well-rounded. I was an electrical engineer. I worked as a controls engineer on the floor, program robots, program PLCs all day long. But they asked me, hey, can you run our dimensional group? And so I learned mechanical, dimensional engineering. I learned how to do that just because they said, hey, we don't have a guy here and we need some help. Can you help? Yeah, sure. I don't, why not?
Right.
And then learned a whole lot doing it, and so I think that's another key is being, getting that well-roundedness, and always, again, I never worried about me. It was always about my surroundings and the people I was working with and how well they were doing. So when I took that position, again, it wasn't, well, shoot, I'm going to learn something there. I don't think I ever thought that way. I just said, heck, the company needs it. I'm going to go do it.
Yeah. I think that's like a key differentiator that you'll see, like the individuals that, with success, like somebody like you kind of in a way like reached organic success. And, some people won't reach that level of success because they have like that mentality of like, this is not my job.
Yeah. Oh, I've certainly seen that before. Right. And, you might get really good at what you do, but at the end of the day, it's the people that have that mentality are going to struggle with moving up. And unfortunately, I mean, I've been around the business for 34 years now or something like that. But it's those people that are always saying, how come I'm not getting promoted, and how come I'm not, it's kind of difficult to even have that discussion sometimes of, don't be so selfish. Just think about the company and work hard, and it'll happen for you,
Yeah, because like that same type of individual is also the one that doesn't really probably care for much criticism.
Yeah. That's usually not even worth having a conversation around it.
So one of the huge premises of this podcast is the come up of how you got to where you're at. Mm-hmm. So at what point in time did you start to feel like, manufacturing was going to be something that you wanted to do? Or was that ever a thing? Were you thinking about these things in high school, or when were your first thoughts of entering into this industry?
My first thoughts were around finishing my engineering degree and then go finding a job, right? And to be honest, I never thought I'd be in manufacturing. Never. I was never exposed to it as a kid. My father wasn't in a manufacturing type of position, even though he was blue collar. He was tool and die, but for a small machine shop. So it wasn't like I understood this bigger picture. And so I think that the manufacturing just happened. I really liked robotics. I had a minor in robotics, a degree in electrical engineering, but a minor in robotics. Where do you go when you have a robotics background in 1989? The only people that were really using robotics were the automotive. Mm-hmm. So I applied to all the automotive companies and wanted to get a job. And so really I was trying to work in robotics. Now that being said, I didn't really understand what General Motors was doing with robotics. And I was designing feedback loops and trying to control servos. And the type of work that I did, or the type of stuff I did in school, had really nothing to do with manufacturing. It had to do with design of robotics, right? I was looking at how to design a servo circuit.
Yeah.
And so that's what I thought I was going to go do. It's so funny to talk about it now, but it really was. I didn't realize I was going into to look at application of robotics. Yeah,
I think that's like huge. That like you don't really have any indication of like what industry looks like, and through like high school and coming out of high school and into college, like you're just blind to what any industry looks like, right? Not just the industry, but any industry really looks like. And you really don't gain that exposure until, you start to get out into the industry, right? It's not really taught in high school. It's not really taught in college.
Nope.
And to be honest, I'm 10 plus years into my career now. And the number one thing that I found that has been just like super mind opening to having an understanding of the industry is events, going to different events. I think I may have attended like one like automation manufacturing event prior to this year, and just going to this event, like going to, we traveled and basically went on tour to like, I don't know, like 8, 9, 10 events, something like that, right?
I followed you on LinkedIn. I saw some of those videos.
But like, I mean, just the mind blowing how much, mind opening that occurred, and just like understanding like what's going on at this level of the industry, like recently just going to Fab Tech, like, going there, like I understood fabrication. I kind of understood, and we have a fab shop, you know what I mean? But I still, like, going into Fab Tech, had no clue really what Fab Tech was going to look like, right? And so like now you go there and you have an understanding, and you see the different pieces of equipment, you see the different companies that are playing in those different roles, whether like press brakes or welding robotics or welding power supplies. You just like a lot of these things, your mind is not open to them until you go and attend something like that.
Yeah, I agree. You don't really know what's all out there. Even working for General Motors for 24 years, I certainly knew my competition. I knew what Chrysler and Ford and BMW and Mercedes and Toyota did. That was part of the job, was as an engineer and as an engineering vice president and director and all the different things I did there, was to understand your competition. And sometimes you copy, sometimes you try to leapfrog, different things like that. But I really didn't understand outside of automotive, how things were done. And I knew every inch of automotive. The press area, the stamping, I knew powertrain, I knew basically every aspect except for all of the plastics that came in, because we didn't do any of that automation. That was all done by tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So I learned that after I left GM, though. I did learn that business pretty well, and we do quite a bit of that work. So it's I do understand that side of the business as well now. But understanding pharmaceutical, and understanding logistics, and understanding some of the different verticals, it's amazing what you can learn out there. And those trade shows help, right? Go to Pack Expo and see what some of these packaging companies are doing in whether it's in pharmaceutical or it's in food and bev or whatever. It's pretty amazing to see what's out there. Always cracks me up now that now that I'm really exposed to the industry, even outside of automotive. You hear so many people say, "Oh, we don't make anything in the U.S. anymore." Oh, you're kidding yourself. There's holy cow, do we make a lot of stuff, right? Just putting eggs in a carton can be automated, and it's just so many things that are now that can be automated, and people are starting to really open their eyes to it, especially with 3.7% unemployment. You have no choice but to figure out, how do I do this with automation? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And realistically, like automation, like you said, automotive has been doing it forever, but like in my opinion, there's still so much manufacturing that hasn't even began in automation.
Go through many towns in Indiana and see how many are in building mobile homes and things like that. That's all manufacturing, and most of that is done by hand. And so there's just there's so many industries out there still doing things by hand, and it's just that's the cool thing about automation, is there's going to be a need for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the only point where like companies like ours are in trouble is if like AI can become good enough where the PLC can just automatically be programmed by like drag and dropping some things. And I think
even then it's still got to be designed, right? You still gotta design the equipment, and you gotta sensorize it, and there's so many aspects to it that have to be done.
I think it'd easily be like 100 years before we're to a point where systems that can design themselves.
We're a ways away. It'll be what was Terminator, where the robots are making robots. Of course, we have robots making robots now too, but not quite like that.
Right. So going back into your transition from college into the workforce, what were some of the things that pushed you to go to General Motors, and how did you land that position?
Yeah, well, it was really the robotics that pushed me there. So here, this is a really funny story. I get my interview with General Motors, and I'm thinking it's because of the robotics. It turns out it wasn't. They didn't really, but they asked me a lot of questions. Penn State. I went to Penn State, very theoretical college. There's many different kinds of universities out there, and you'll get different types of education there. It's very theoretical. And so, the hands-on aspect of it is pretty slim. When I got to the General Motors interview, they asked me what kind of processor have you worked on? And I said, well, I worked on 8088 and I worked on 68,000. And they were, what is that? And I said, those are microprocessors. And I've programmed, I did a ton of assembly language programming, and they said, no, what kind of PLCs? And I said, PLC, and they said, do you know what a PLC is? I said, it's a programmable logic controller, but like, no, we didn't learn anything about a programmable logic controller. I know what it is. I know what it stands for, but I don't know what you do with it,
Yeah.
And so I left that interview thinking, I ain't getting that job. And it turns out they weren't interviewing me because of my robotics experience. I was Unix system administrator for Penn State. I ran the Unix lab for Penn State, and I understood Unix inside and out. GM was implementing their first Unix system. They had all DEC VAXs, and they were putting in their first Unix system. They needed somebody that understood Unix. And so I didn't go on the floor to begin with. I put in a Unix system. I put in Ethernet. I mean, that back then Ethernet was brand new. People knew what Ethernet. I knew what Ethernet was, but we ran broadband through the plant. We didn't run Ethernet through the plant, and so they hired me to put in this system to do upload, download, compare. If you know what that is for PLCs, right? Today you just use Siemens software, or use Rockwell's software to upload, download, and compare programs. But back then they didn't have that capability, and so I put in this system to interface to every PLC. So I had to do all the networking across the board. But that's what they hired me for, was to be the Unix system administrator and to put in this whole system to do upload, download, compare of PLCs. And then, that's what I did my first year, but, quickly turned into, I taught myself how to program the robots, and obviously the PLCs, I had to understand, what I was looking at for comparisons, right? When we were doing uploads and downloads. So within a year I was out on the floor debugging and troubleshooting, but it was kind of funny. They didn't hire me to be a robotic or a PLC programmer or a controls engineer. It was to put in their Unix system.
It's kind of funny how that works out. Also, a good point too, that maybe if you want a particular position, that sometimes applying for a position that's a little bit of a tangent of that position might get you to the position that you want to be in.
Yeah, it did in this case. And well, the odd thing was they were looking for a controls engineer. Why they posted the position the way they did, or maybe they hired somebody for that position, and as they were talking to me, they realized I could put a Unix system. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I didn't get hired as a controls engineer. It just turned into that over time.
Right. What was some of the transition points that got you from moving away from that system to dealing with more PLC and robotic systems?
Well, first I had to understand all the communications. So back then it was data highway plus for PLCs to communicate. And of course we were sending data over those, but most people didn't really understand networking of PLCs back then. And so I had to understand the networking, because I had to communicate to every PLC on the floor, and there were hundreds of them, right? There were probably 400 or 500 PLCs out there. So really, I think it was that. And then people would ask, hey, I gotta send this data from this PLC to this PLC, really struggling. Can you help? Okay. Yeah. So I'd write their logic to do all the data transfer from one PLC to the next. And then, just slowly that was starting within 6 months of being there. I was doing that. They were certainly asking me all about the networking of all that, of all the PLCs. It was a big deal, right? I had tons of electricians out running cables for me. So much different than today with Ethernet. So it was.
You definitely got to be involved in a super interesting time of data, and how we transfer data. And to me, like I kind of missed out on that, right? I came into my career a little bit later, and then also working with a systems integrator. Most of the things that we worked with were new systems, right?
Yeah.
So like we kind of missed. I mean, don't get me wrong, I got the chance to get my hands dirty and have a couple headaches working with it, but it's like a whole like era of technology and like data communication.
Oh,
and it was a kind of a short period of time.
yeah. The cool thing, I mean, I started on PLC twos. I actually trained on a black box on a PLC one.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's like late 70s, early 80s technology. We still had a few of those in the plant when I started in 1989, right? So, but the majority of our PLCs were PLC twos, and PLC2 there was no documentation. You weren't working on a computer. You were working on a T3 terminal. So these T3 terminals were just little keyboards, right? With a little screen, a little black and white screen, and you programmed on there. So way different. The technology was so much different.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, it was really cool. I actually started on a two, learned PLC fives relatively quickly. They were already coming in 1989, 1990. So twos, fives, and then the ControlLogix platform came out in '98, I think, and we quickly adopted that. But I also got to see, the changeover from everything hardwired. When I started, there was no network, so you hardwired from local I/O. It started as local I/O, then we went to remote I/O, so that you could start to put racks out on tools and not have everything in the panels. And so I got to see all of that. I got to see that whole transition from a hardwire based local I/O application all the way to now, running networks and running Ethernet I/O. I got to experience it all. So what a cool, that was cool. That was cool to see everything from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're even doing wireless I/O now.
Yeah, exactly. You are. I mean, I haven't done it, but I know my engineers are out, doing some of those applications. So, pretty cool. Same thing with safety. I mean, when I started out, there were no fences.
Oh, wow.
Robots were just, all you had was guardrail.
Really?
And
wow.
you just walked right in with the robot. At that time, the pendants were, you couldn't read anything on a pendant. They called them top hats, and it was a PLC. And then a whole bunch of push buttons. And so if you wanted to go to repair, you pressed go to repair on the top hat, and the top hat was right next to the robot. So you were standing next to the robot, say go to repair, robot would come down, and you'd change caps on the robot sitting there next to you. No fencing, no everything moving. That was all the way up till probably 95.
Really?
So around 95 we started putting fencing. 94, 95 time period. We started putting fencing up, and then after fencing, then you started to use safety relays, and then from safety relays to safety PLCs. So
that was kind of most of like the modification work and a lot of like the robot cell upgrades that I dealt with throughout my career. A lot of them were replacements due to like safety constraints. Like they needed to make some modification to the cell, and then like your standards are now that if you make any modification to a cell, now you have to upgrade the entire cell, right?
Yeah.
So you had some system, like a lot of these original systems were like their fencing was like chain link fencing.
Yeah.
And like a key lock that's a physical key, and no electronic locking or anything like that. And so like the whole entire system would have to come down, and we'd have to replace it with like door interlock switches and things along those lines.
Yeah, the old days. I mean, we got on that subject of getting to see a whole bunch of stuff. It was just it was cool to live through that, and it's going to continue, like you said. Wireless I/O now, and I think there's some wireless safety out there. I know there's a couple robot manufacturers that have wireless pendants.
Yeah.
So
Technically anything that is like CIP safe, you can do it wirelessly, because Wi-Fi itself also is a fail-safe technology. So if you ever lose your wireless connection, it's just going to make it
goes off.
you're in an east-out condition.
Yeah, cool.
So whenever you started migrating more into doing some of the robotics, I mean, did you just spend your whole entire part of your career just like in that robotics side?
I did.
Did
Yeah,
you?
I did. I spent, so I started in a plant in Baltimore, and I worked there till 94. And then I moved to what we called central office for General Motors, but it was our central engineering group. And basically you were a project manager at that point. You're running contracts with outside resources, right? Integrators. I was a project manager for an integrator, and giving them direction on, how we wanted controls built and all those types of things. And so I lost track there. I was getting to. Can you repeat the question again? I apologize, but
yes. So this is like kind of your transition from doing the robotics, and then you move.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Sorry. So when I went to central to central office, we had a project coming up, large program, truck program, 5, 6, 7 plants. I think GM had at that time running trucks. So we had to update 7 plants with automation, and we were putting in all new robots. At that time, we bought 3,000 ABB robots for that project. 3,000.
Wow.
And and so it was my job to back then you didn't buy a robot and it was ready to program. Back then you bought a robot and it was dumb. You couldn't do anything with it. You had to create a programming environment for it, right? So so even like making a weld spot, I had to write code to make a weld spot in there. So and so it was my job for like 3 years straight, nothing but those robots. I became the robot guy for GM, and there was one of me in different divisions in GM. So GM at that time had 4 or 5 divisions, and we were trying to combine all the divisions into one engineering. And so I represented our division to come up with one GM standard, one way of programming robots, one way to dress a robot, one way to interface with the robot from the PLC. I worked on that with a group of 4 other individuals. So I think 5 years straight, I did nothing but robots.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were like one of the major people that kind of helped develop GM's like programming standard.
1 of 5. 1 of 5. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's still in place today. I mean, even at that time, we developed the safety gate box. All the gate boxes we developed. That team developed it. It's basically the same safety gate box today as it was in 1997 when we developed it. A little different, but not much.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like that's one thing that like definitely is always in the back of my mind is like being a business owner versus like taking like a career path. Is like something like that to me is like an ultra cool legacy. Like, and I don't know, just like going through that process, being you are the guy that helped develop the GM standard. I mean, to me, that's a pretty big deal. I might be just nerding out a little bit. But.
I like to nerd out too, but yeah, no, it is cool, right? I mean, I'm pretty proud of it personally. But again, you don't get there just because you want to, right? I mean, I worked hard to get there. I worked really hard. There were years where I was putting in, major hours, working Saturdays and Sundays, and just because I was a nutcase when it came to being like a geeky engineer. I was right there.
Yeah, and evidently programmed well enough where they thought your code was to good enough standard to let's just go ahead and write the whole GM standard for that.
Yeah, on the robot side. On the PLC side, they wouldn't let me touch that because I helped with the GM hardwire standards. All of the panel design standards, all of the, all of that, pneumatics, hydraulics. There was a team of 5 that did that also. That started after the robots, and I helped with the hardwire, but they would never let me touch the software for the PLCs. We had some really, because I'm a geek, right? And we had some really geeky guys that were way better than me writing code, and they did all that work.
All right. Well, what was your position at that point in time? Your job title?
I think by the time I did the hardware standards, I was a senior engineer doing the robot standards.
Okay.
I was a technical fellow. GM has a technical path for people to progress their careers, and I mean, it's hard without going into a lot of detail. 5th level, 6th level, 7th level, 8th level. 8th level is a technical fellow. There's only a handful of those people, and I was a technical fellow by the time I did the hardware standards, and then of course there were some technical fellows that were doing the software.
And what is like position 9 and 10 look like of that then?
9th level, really only a handful. I mean, these are your, and they're very specialized. But I think we had 5 in the whole corporation in the controls area, right? There's a mechanical area as well, and but in the controls area, I think we had 5 9th levels, and they were very specialized. One was robotics, and I had worked with him throughout the whole process, but we had one that was just networks. He did nothing but, and at that time, don't forget, we went from data highway and remote IO to device net to, then finally to Ethernet. But he was working on Ethernet in 2000. He was, I had just put in a program for control net. I had just used control net, which you don't even hear that name anymore. But he was asking my opinion. What do you think about Ethernet versus control net? And I was like, go to Ethernet as fast as you can. This control net stuff is junk, and so, he was trying to get the company to move to Ethernet as quickly as possible.
Yeah, he was like the IT guy before there was IT.
Yeah, sort of.
So then, like 10th level, what would something like that look like?
No 10th, and I mean, to get there, it's called unclassified, right? 9th is the last level, and then you're unclassified. You're basically a director or higher there, and I did make it to unclassified, and I did it. Actually, I was a 9. So they have a 9X, which is technical. You're an engineer basically, still as a 9X, and then there's a 9T that is a manager of technical people, and I was 9X. All the 9Ts worked for me, and I was a 9X, and so I, like, the network guy worked for me, and the robot guy worked for me I think that was around 2003, 2004 time period. So really all the biggest geeks in General Motors worked for the biggest geek of all at General Motors, developing standards.
Gotcha. So this like tier system that you're talking about, is this like technical engineering? Is that what this tier system's for?
Yeah, so you have engineers that start out at level 5, right? When you get hired out of college, you're a level 5, and then there's bands within that level. As you progress your career and you get better at being a controls engineer, right? So the first people coming out, you give them small projects and you let them go do some small stuff. And as you progress into 6th level, now you start to maybe you start to be a project manager of other engineers, right? So you might get a small job. You get to 7th level, you're running big projects. You might have $100 million project that you're responsible for, and you lead 6s and 7s. So now you become a technical lead. They don't work for you, but they're leads. 8th level is typically a manager. So the manager that they all work for is an 8th. But you can also do a technical route. You can become an 8T, and that 8T is, only a handful of 8Ts, just like there's only a handful of 9Ts.
Gotcha.
So it's really a progression. It's GM's way of progressing
Yeah.
engineers through their life.
Yeah. No, I'm super glad that you're sharing this, because I mean, I think it's great insight for. I'm sure if somebody already works for GM, they probably already know this, but like anybody outside of GM or in college, like they can kind of see like what this career path looks like.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely very smart for them as a company to create that tier system and like have like levels of to what engineer you are, because it gamifies things in a sense,
Yeah,
right?
well, and you aspire to something, right? And then
Yeah,
you have aspirations. Hey, I'm a 5th level. I want to be a 6th level. As fast
yeah,
as I can get to 6th level, I want to be a 6th level.
yeah, absolutely. So after you kind of tier through or go through all those different tiers, are you now you're now what, in an upper level management? You said like director or something like that, or
Yeah, so there's typically, within GM, there's probably, I'll just use them as an example since we've been, but there might be 10 managers of engineers, and there might be, underneath of those 8s, there might be, 15 people in each one of those, that are 5th, 6th, or 7th level working for that 8th level. And then those 8s report to a director. So director might have 7 or 8 8th level managers that works for that director. And you might have, at the time, I think I had 130 people reporting to me total when I was a director, there. So, and at that point, you're, at director level, you're pretty much engaged in every program that GM has. If you're in controls, same thing with mechanical. If you're a mechanical engineer and you're a director, you basically, you have your fingers in every single project that GM has. But they separate that out, by group too. So I was a body shop guy. When I was the director, I did body shop. And
like
then as you
weld?
get, yeah, all the welding, all the spot
Oh,
welding.
really nice.
Yeah. And so that was my responsibility. That was the highest automated area. And then paint was second highest, and GA, there's very little automation. But yeah, I think, that's basically the hierarchy. Now, once you get above director, you're executive director. There's director for body. There's a director for GA. There's a director for paint. There's a director for powertrain. There's a director for stamping. And then those directors report to an executive director, right? And then that executive director has everything in General Motors, which I did that in Europe. I lived in Germany for
Oh, wow.
3 years, and I ran GM's. I was executive director, and I had body, paint, GA, press, everything under me.
Wow, that's awesome. What does the director position look like, and executive director? What are those job titles? What do they mean for, like, let's say for instance, somebody who doesn't understand what a director level position is?
Yeah, I think with, director level, you're really strategizing, at a much higher level. How are we going to make sure that we are successful in putting all of this equipment into facility A or B or C? How are we working, together with product, because product engineering is a whole separate entity, right? And outside of manufacturing, how do we know what products, are going to, what do they look like? What kind of software are we going to need to make sure that we're tracking the right, types of products down through the line? Like in body shop, there might be options and styles, right? You might be running a Chevy, and then a Cadillac, and then a Buick, and of course you need to understand that. You need to understand the differences between those. So, I think at the director level, you're paying attention more at a much higher level, and then you're feeding that down to your EGMs that are doing much smaller level, and then they're feeding that down to their engineers that are responsible for pieces and parts of that system.
Gotcha. So like, let's say for instance, like a new line, like the procurement of that new line, is that coming from director level? Are they the ones making the decision of like, hey, we're going to need to install a new line because we have a new capacity level that we need to reach, or who's the
Yeah.
making those
Yeah,
decisions?
and it's multiple directors, right? Because there's a mechanical engineering director, there's a controls engineering director. Those two are typically getting together, talking with their EGM, strategizing over where they're going to place that work and how they're going to place that work. And
Gotcha.
so you're at that level. It's now, I can tell you, when I was a 7th level, we ran our business different though, right? We weren't doing turnkey, we were doing T&M. And so when I was a 7th level back in the 90s, I was hiring T&M companies to work for me, T&M controls companies.
Really?
Yeah. I made that decision, not nobody else.
Gotcha.
And I decided who was going to do work for me. And now I was just doing a piece of my pie. So I might've been doing, $3, $4, $5 million worth of controls work. But I made those decisions, on who was doing that.
Yeah, that's an interesting model to kind of take that inside and take it internally.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly sometimes it helps me in the position I'm in now to understand who, at least from a General Motors perspective, who makes decisions. You can kind of extrapolate that into other companies. It's not really that different in other companies also. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, say for instance, like for us as a company, like one thing that I try to do as much as possible is keep things internal. I don't know, it's like something about being like 100% in control of your process, right? Like if you go external and you do a turnkey system, it's a little bit more difficult to say, hey, that that PLC program is not written in the way that we want it written.
Yeah.
Or you find out later, and then
this is very hard to control.
Yeah. And so that definitely makes it a lot easier to have a tighter control on things.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
And that was the difference of, when we were doing T&M, I was a project manager, but I needed to, I helped the companies that I would hire. I would be a big part of, I became their checker. I was like, I don't even know if people check anymore nowadays because things have changed so much, but I actually went with a yellow pen, right? A highlighter, and I checked every number on every page and made sure that it went to the right location. And, when I talk about a check, a real check, highlighter, everything. And again, I don't even know if we do that kind of detailed work, because with AutoCAD, electric, and programs like that, I don't think you need to do it as much now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that kind of needs to be brought back more, because that was like one of the things that was very frustrating to me, like working with a systems integrator, was that we would do installs and somebody else would do like the panel build or something, and you get out there and you're rewiring half a panel because whoever built your panel, like, right,
Well, and sometimes it starts with those drawings. If the drawings aren't checked, he's just building what's in your drawing. But I did that too. I went to the panel shops. I made sure that they were building exactly what was in the drawings. So that was sort of the job, was more like, it's a project manager, right? I didn't physically write code, but I checked it. I didn't physically do drawings, but I checked it. I made sure that everything was done properly before I sent it out for panel. So that's a controls engineer at a big company like that. A 6 level, 7th level controls engineer is basically, you're a PM. You're checking other people's work.
Gotcha. So throughout your career at GM, what you said you made it to an executive level director when you was in Germany. what transpired next? Did you shift it back to the U.S. while you were still with GM, or what did that process look like?
Yeah, 2010, I finished up my assignment. I came back to GM. GM was a much different place because they went through a bankruptcy in 2009. I didn't experience that in Europe. We were actually booming in Europe. So I didn't experience what everybody experienced here in the United States,
Gotcha.
fortunately, right? Because it was
Right.
not a
Yeah.
nice time.
Yeah.
But um, when I came back, they put me in as a launch manager slash chief engineer for a program. So the chief engineers are responsible for all the money in a program. So
Mm.
a program might be $1 billion, somewhere between half a billion and $1 billion. And so I was responsible for all the manufacturing funding for stamping for, so basically all the groups. So I came out of the controls group that ran body paint GA. There was also a mechanical group that ran body, and a mechanical group that ran paint, and a mechanical group that ran GA. All of those groups work sort of dotted line to the chief engineer, the manufacturing chief engineer, and the manufacturing chief engineer doles out money for the project. Oh, you need 200 million for a body shop. Okay. I'll give you 190 million instead of 200. Here
Yeah.
you go. All right. And so the chief is at least at General Motors. The chief is the chief. And so I did that. I did that for a couple years
Nice.
when I came back, and then I also ran launch. I was the launch manager also. Then they liked how I ran the launch, so they asked me to write standards for launches. So for about a year, I did standards on how to launch a vehicle. That was kind of interesting working with all the other launch managers on that. And then final job, I went back to a plant to run their general assembly, and said, I like engineering a lot better than operations. So decided to leave General Motors. My next level in manufacturing engineering was way up. Right, I was really trying to become a vice president of engineering, and to do that, I needed to go back through the plants and spend more time in the plants. And once I got there, I thought, you know what, I don't really want to do this anymore. I want to be an engineer. So I left and went to a small engineering company, a small integrator. So that was my foray. That's what pushed me into working as an integrator. Is because I like the technical side of the business. I like it a lot more than the operation side of the business.
Where did you transition to?
A small company called ESIS Automation. They were about 120 people at the time, maybe, I don't know, 20 million a year in automation that they were doing, and the goal there was to just grow the company. They basically they wanted to be $100 million company. They were a $20 million company. That's where I learned the plastic side of the business. So they were only doing work in body shop, and they were doing work in paint shop, and they were doing some work in GA. And so I introduced them to powertrain, and we started doing powertrain work. And then I also introduced them to the plastic side, all the tier ones that were doing plastics. And GM did a little bit of plastics as well at their facility down in Nashville. But basically my job was to grow that company.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What made you take that transition from GM to a company of that size and also integration?
Well, one, it was engineering, right? I wanted to get back to being an engineer, but I also liked the business side of engineering. As a director, I liked even chief engineer. Chief engineer was really a cool job because you're really looking at big picture type stuff. And so the fact that I was trying to grow that company, be an entrepreneur again, right? We talked about that earlier. Be an entrepreneur, learn how to, run the business, learn how to to do sales. I had never done sales before. Now all of a sudden I have to worry about sales. And you know, at General Motors, you don't worry about selling a car.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all taken care of for you. But
Yeah.
here I had to sell, and I had
Mhm.
to be able to sit in front of a customer, and I had to. So you learn new things, right?
Mhm.
And we were small, right? I didn't have the whole 120 working for me. I just had a small group
Yeah.
working for me, and you know, I put on all kinds of hats. I would be in the lab, you know, working with guys. I remember doing a drawing package. I did a drawing package like in the first 6 months that I was
Mhm.
there. I was close to VP, and and here I am doing a drawing
Yeah.
package. But it was kind of fun, right? It was good to get back and get
Get
the
dirty again. Yeah.
hands dirty, and in that position, I had to put all kinds of hats on. When I was sitting with a customer, they called me VP. You know, when I was talking to the guy that was working for me, I was, you know, shoe shine guy, or, you know, go
Right.
sweep the floor. I would sweep floors even during
Right.
that time period, because we just didn't have enough people to do what we needed to do.
Mm.
And so you
Yeah.
just do whatever you put whatever
Mhm.
hat you need to put on.
How was the transition from going from engineering to sales?
I loved it.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a kind of a people person. Maybe you know, even though I can geek out and really like to be geeky about the engineering, I do like to talk to people, and I like to have a nice conversation. And I think that's the biggest part of sales is
Yeah.
you're just trying to talk to people and figure out how to help them.
Yeah.
You know, I never took the approach of selling. I just took the approach of how can I help you and what can we do to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also like you already had like an amazing career run. You're already working on major scale projects and um, communicating with vendors, communicating with the, outsourced engineers and then also your internal teams as well. Like I'm sure there's a ton of communication that went on with the positions that you had, and
No,
especially for yourself where was ended up landing more of like that executive type of position. I think most of it, I mean, a huge portion of that's communication.
yeah, it's all at the end of the day what makes the world go around.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah.
If we all sit in our cubicles and put our nose to the grindstone, work will get done, but it's probably not going to get done well. It's probably going to get done inefficiently. It's probably going to, when you go, because you never do the whole thing by yourself, right? You're still, even a controls engineer, you're working with three other controls engineers, and each one's got different sections and different portions, and you know, so you have to be able to communicate in this industry. It is
Mhm.
it. In fact, we everybody that we hire, you know, if you like to work by yourself, this is the wrong industry for you. You really have to be able to communicate to mechanical engineers, to other controls engineers, to PMs, to the customer, to everybody. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. What your position there, did JR end up buying them?
they did.
Okay.
JR bought ESIS. However, I wasn't there when they bought them. I
Oh,
took a
really?
short, yeah, I took a short stint at Amazon.
Really?
And
Okay.
so my old boss at Amazon, or I mean at General Motors, was an executive vice president for Amazon. And he called me up one day and he said, Craig, there's this opening that they're trying to fill in Amazon. So Amazon they really had not put any robots in ever.
Mm.
And so they're Kiva robots, but they're not robots. They're little AGVs, right? They're AMRs.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they were starting to look at 6-axis robots to do different tasks. And he said, Craig, they want somebody to run their automation group. And I can't think of anyone better than you. You want to
Mm.
come in. It's a global role. And so I loved what I was doing. I wasn't looking for a job. But
Yeah.
it's Amazon, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is Amazon. What the heck? I would kick myself today if I didn't take that job,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
didn't
You at
go
least had to
try
try
it.
it out, right?
Yeah. And so I told the owners, you know, I really feel bad, but this is Amazon. I
Yeah.
gotta go see what this is all about. And so I did. And I only was there 18 months. I didn't stay long. They allowed me to live in Michigan that was home at that point. And but my office was in Seattle. I was commuting every week, Monday morning on a plane, and Thursday night on the red eye home every week.
Wow.
Plus going all over the world on installations. So I was in Germany, and I was in Spain, and I was all over the country, California, New Jersey, you name it. I was never home. And I knew that taking the job. And I thought, well, my youngest child was like a junior in high school. And when your kids start to get that old, they don't, they don't really care if you're around anymore anyhow. And so I thought, well, what the heck, I'll go do this. And it's not going to make a difference on anything, but it made a difference.
Yeah.
My son was a big sports nut, and he played a lot of sports, and I couldn't stand missing that stuff. And I was always missing his games because I was never home. And so I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. And so I left. I called the owners of ESIS. They said, well, it's not ESIS anymore. We're JR Automation. We got bought. But we'll go talk to, they were still there. The owners were still running ESIS at that point. And hey, we'll go talk to the CEO at JR. And of course he brought me in, and they brought me in a sales position. I knew business development. They knew what my track record was previously for ESIS. And so they brought me in as new business development. And then that turned into senior vice president of sales and marketing. And then senior vice president of sales and marketing turned into CEO.
Gotcha. Wow. That's crazy. That's a remarkable.
Wild ride, huh?
Yeah. Wow. Huh. I mean, realistically, you can't think of a much better career run.
Thank you. Yeah. I tell you, I feel the same way. And I at this point, it's the culmination of a career. There is no next step. I love this company. I love the people that work here. I think of it as family. As you can tell throughout my whole career, it's never been about me. It's about the job and the people and so here, I just feel like I'm the dad of 2,000 people.
Right.
and they're all part of my family. This is how I feel.
I have a couple more questions for you before we get off here today. One of them is kind of personal to self. With bringing somebody like you on to a company that you've worked at GM for so many years, you also worked with the company before in a sales role. What do you think the impact is on the company hiring you for like the sales process? Maybe I need to reword that differently. How much like benefit or impact is bringing like somebody like yourself with your type of career run, bringing you into the company?
I think tremendous, right? Because first off, I come with tons of credibility, having 24 years at General Motors, having held vice president roles. I can tell you, we don't get every job right at JR. It's impossible to get every job right. I wish we did. And the engineers would like to get every job right, but sometimes you get into some situations where they're not. And many times, that's when my background kicks in of, hey, one, we're going to get this job done right. It's going to get done. Right. Two, whoever I need to talk to at that company, and I've talked to CEOs of major companies, and I give them my background and I tell them what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. And then sometimes I have to tell them how they got us into the situation to begin with, because sometimes it's not our fault. It's mutual, right? It's never just one person typically, but and so having the background and the credibility and the fact that I held some of those larger positions, I think that they listen. They listen, and I'm never really hesitant to get on those calls. I hate them. Anyone that says they love those calls is crazy. But I'm never hesitant, because in my mind, that's the only way I earn my money.
Yeah.
If I'm helping my team, you know.
Yeah.
So I think incredible to get somebody with that kind of experience, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the thought that's in my mind is like, obviously, well, you know, that at some point in time, I would like to bring on individuals that have like track records like that into our company. And with making that decision, obviously it's a pretty big decision, because I'm sure somebody with your credibility, that that's a pretty big salary package, right? Something that you have to really take some time to make a really good decision on it. But on the other hand, it's like, for us as a company, like, you know, one of the things is us striving and having our ambitious goals that we have, that I know it's not going to be just me, right? I've not had 20 years at Ford experience, right? I'm gonna have to bring those people on to our company that have worked at Ford, GM, have worked at Chevy, you know what I mean, for all these years, and be able to bring in their knowledge, their ecosystems, and be able to apply it to our current processes and how we operate as a company.
Yeah, I think I think I have hired many people still that I worked with at General Motors into JR. I think that most of them have worked out really well, and they do what I need. Sometimes, you know, typically you're picking guys up near the end of their career. Sometimes that can be a problem, right? Of people who are nearing the end of their career, and they're not, maybe they don't have the ambitions that they used to have. Most of them do, because they got to where they were because they did have ambition. But every once in a while you make a mistake. So I think that's the only, and I don't know how to spot that mistake. You know, I don't know how to say, this guy's going to really kill it for me and this guy's not. That's all part of the interviewing process and all those types of things. But even then, like I said, I brought people on and said, man, I really thought this one was going to help in this way, and they haven't, you know. So that's possible too. It's the other thing is the transition from being customer to being supplier is sometimes very, very difficult for those people to make that leap. It wasn't easy for me. The first year, you know, I had people coming in from GM that used to work for me several levels below me, and now they're coming in and they're telling me what I need to do. And
on a project management level.
And so I don't have a huge ego, but some people do, and so you have to kind of watch that too, that ego, because at the end of the day, they're our customers, and so you have to treat them with respect, even when you think that they don't deserve it. You have to treat them with respect, you know, and so you got to be careful with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think as a whole, it's very good to have like people coming from that industry experience, no matter what level, even if it's just like PLC or robot programmer, like coming from that industry and then coming into like system integration, just because it just brings more skill set into our sector of the industry.
Yep.
You know,
working, for sure.
That's like a big thing for me. So I've done system integration my entire career. So like there's a huge portion of me that I really wish I had more of a manufacturing background. So like that way I was there on a daily basis, seeing more of the problems that are actually happening on the shop floor or assembly line, plant floor, I guess you could say. And seeing more of those things and got to be exposed to them and experience them, because like it's affected like my sales process, right? It's hard for me to, it's hard Oh, I think I'm back. Okay. Yeah, it's harder for me to say like these are the pain points of my customer, right? Because I didn't operate on the
You didn't
manufacturing
sit
course.
there, yeah.
Yeah, so like all of my experience or all of my knowledge from that is I have to ask the questions, right?
Yeah.
What are some issues that you deal with? What are and yeah,
which I think the customer appreciates that as well, right? I have to ask those questions even, because it's not the same if I'm talking to somebody in the pharmaceutical industry, their pain points sometimes are much different than GM. So I think they appreciate that. Does it help? Yeah, because you want to be able to step in their shoes. You want to think like they think. How do I save you from the issues that you had in the past, right? And I think that goes a long way. But I also think that they're very appreciative of having the dialogue of what is it that ails you, right? What how can I help you? They want to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell a tremendous difference in like our especially our quote conversion. Huge difference on like just calling the customer more often and just saying, hey, like, where are we at with this? What's holding you back? Like, what can I do to help out and move this process along? Like, just being more vocal on those topics of like, I mean, have doubled our conversion rate.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, and it's because they know you care, right? They know you care.
Absolutely. So before we sign off here, do you have any last valuable points to add to the audience?
No, I think I covered it. It's hopefully it came across as you don't get here because you want to get here. You got to work your butt off the whole way, and no different than starting your own company. You're not successful just because you want to be successful. You're successful because you do everything in your power to be successful, and that's life in general. Nothing comes easy. Everything is difficult, and you need to go work hard every day if you want to get somewhere. And there are people that don't, right? There's a whole lot of people that say, hey, I want to live a more leisurely lifestyle, and they only want to work 40 hours. That's okay too. Nothing wrong with that. But don't expect to be a CEO, and definitely don't expect to own your own company if that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to talk on it too much, but like one of the pushes for starting my own company is I was that guy that worked 80-hour weeks, and the owner of the company would work 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week. And,
Wow.
And so I'm like, you see that, all the employees see that the culture was just terrible in that sense of like, this project's like a week behind and this guy's going home early, and he's also a programmer too. So like, you could be out here physically helping us like program this line, and you're not. I mean,
that's surprising to hear.
Yeah,
that an owner was taking that. I mean, it's almost unheard of. He had to have a few years of success to that point.
That particular situation, what it was, because I analyzed it for years before I quit. Because I was the type of person I was okay with sticking it out with the company my entire career. Yeah. I was one of those individuals, and so I stuck it out and I analyzed like, why is why is the culture like this? Why is he operating in this way? And what I found was he, for this particular instance, is he did his company was basically founded on he didn't want to work a lot of hours at the company he was with. Right, they were making him work 80-hour weeks, so he said, okay, you know what, I'm going to quit. I'm going to work less hours and get paid more and provide them the same service. So he worked as a contractor for the same company for like 10, 20 years, I think, right? And then hired a couple people to help him out on the programming, and then hired another person who had kind of the vision to grow the company.
Okay.
And So now he's pushing for capital projects and things like that. And this is the exact same time pretty much that I came along. I came along 6 months after that. And so, you know, it's just a founder of a company that didn't really have the ambition to have a big company. I think sure they would love to have the money that comes along with a big company, but they didn't really have the vision and the desire to truly operate something massive and worthwhile.
Yeah, I tell my kids that, hey, again, nothing wrong with that. Just don't complain. You know, don't if that's what your desire is, then you're doing good. You did great, right? Don't complain that, you know, oh shit, we're only 3 million in sales and we want to be 6 million in sales. Don't complain about that, you know, because that takes hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, I'm super glad to have you on today.
That was a pleasure, Malachi.
Fascinated with your career run. I mean, just remarkable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll definitely be watching back on this episode again.
Awesome. I enjoyed it, and please keep posting on LinkedIn. I love your posts.
Thank you.
They're great. So
thank you. I appreciate it. Is there a place where people can find you if they want to reach you?
Yeah, I try to keep that a little bit private, but I'm on LinkedIn, right? I mean, you know, no problem. You can link in with me and you can follow me. I post quite a bit too. But maybe a little less than you, and not as interesting, right? But you'll see. I'll share my thoughts periodically on LinkedIn on different things. So I think that's probably the best way.
Gotcha. I'm sure whatever thoughts you share, they're valuable.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Craig. I appreciate your time.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.